Lessons in Logic, video 26. And this will be a review or overview of a lot of ground we've covered on categorical syllogisms. I just want to look at one argument. It's the one I abandoned at the end of the last video. And I want to do a scheme of abbreviation on it to represent it in standard form, i.e. to symbolize the argument, i.e. to take all the content of the argument and shove it aside so we can look at the pattern of the argument, the form, the way we're reasoning about things without any unnecessary distractions with the things we're reasoning about, so we can then examine that argument form to see if it's valid. And I want to do that with 3 methods. Now, as far as testing arguments for validity is concerned, the rules, the 6 rules method, the Venn diagram method, or the mood figure method is perfectly fine all by itself. We learn 3. It's normal to learn 2 or 3 in a logic class. That's what I'm doing in this series. It helps us understand how categorical syllogisms work better to have 3 methods. It can reinforce things, and that's largely what I'm doing in this video, showing how you should get the same conclusion about it being invalid or valid based on 3 methods. These 3 methods, if you don't make any mistakes with them anyway, will always yield the same results. The same argument will be demonstrated to be valid by Venn diagram, by the mood figure method, and by the 6 rules method, or demonstrated invalid by all 3. That's what we're going to do in this video. I lost track of one of the things I was going to say. Oh, I think I was going to say, strictly speaking, it's not necessary to have all 3 methods. For the rest of your life, if all you want to do is be able to test categorical syllogisms for validity, just pick one and use it and forget the other 2 if you like. But if you want to understand how categorical syllogisms work, if you want to be able to double check with multiple methods, or if you're in a logic class that requires you to do more than just one method, then this video is for you. More than one method. All right, so let's look at the argument. All guinea pigs are fuzzy friends. All fuzzy friends are creatures that make good pets. So some creatures that make good pets are guinea pigs. Here is the strategy we're going to use. And this is a strategy you could use for any categorical syllogism. First, we're going to find out what are the major, minor, and middle terms and symbolize them using S, P, and M. S for the minor term, P for the major term, M for the middle term. Then we state the argument using those symbols, major premise first, minor premise second, and the conclusion is going to be something S something P. And the first something is going to be a quantifier, all number sum. The second something is going to be a copula, R or R naught. Then we're going to state the mood in the figure. Then we're going to do a Venn diagram. Then we're going to see which rules are broken. And then based on all 3 of these methods, the mood figure method, the Venn diagram method, and the rules broken method, the 6 rules method, we're going to say whether it's valid or invalid. We'll cross out one of these and emphasize the other, or cross out the other and emphasize the one. Now, since I'm not assuming that you've memorized, and I don't even have memorized at this time, either this or the 6 rules, I've memorized both of them in my time, but I don't keep them all in my head at this time. We're going to keep this handy. You may have to memorize this for your logic class if you're taking a logic class. Anyway, let's do it. The minor term is the first term appearing in the conclusion. And that would be creatures that make good pets. Guinea pigs is the major term. And the middle term is the other one, the one of the premises. So the conclusion here is some S R P. Some creatures that make good pets are guinea pigs. Our major premise is the one with guinea pigs. All P are M. All guinea pigs are fuzzy friends. That is our major premise. Our minor premise, all fuzzy friends are creatures that make good pets, is all M are S. Now, just looking at it, I can see what the figure is. And this is just something you'll have to memorize. My mnemonic device is those horizontal and vertical lines. So I've got this line, which tells me figure 4. In other words, the middle term is the second term in the major premise, the first term in the minor premise, which makes it figure 4. The mood is AAO, because first premise A, second premise A, conclusion. Make that I, AAI. First premise A, second premise A, conclusion I. All right, AAI, figure 4. Now let's do the Venn diagram method. Actually, let's finish up the mood figure method. We've identified the mood in the figure. Now you have to say whether it's valid. Is AAI valid in figure 4? Nope. Actually, AAI is not valid in any figure. So it's going to be invalid, and we should find the same thing with the Venn diagram method. Let's call out our handy Microsoft Paint for Venn diagramming this. Now, as I probably stated before, once you have it symbolized, now this is the symbolization. Technically, the symbolization is your key or legend or scheme of abbreviation, as I prefer to call it, plus the statement of the argument using those symbols. But once you get to that point, the statement of the argument using those symbols is all you really need. This is just pure form, i.e. it's just the pattern of the argument. Well, still technically it's a symbolization of the pattern of the argument, but close enough. Now we only have the pattern of the argument to worry about. We scroll down, we ignore everything that came before. So now Venn diagramming this, all P or M, all M or S, they're both universal premises. We can chart either one first. All P or M, that means nothing is a P but not an M. All M or S, nothing is an M but not an S. Now, does it follow that some S are P? No, you'd have to have an X somewhere in these regions. With this region shaded, you'd have to have an X right here in the middle of all the regions, but we don't. So this argument is not, in fact, valid. Here's our Venn diagram. All P or M, all M are S, and invalid. Now let's see which rules it breaks. Hang on, let's not get ahead of ourselves with this, although we expect to be able to say that it's invalid. Let's go ahead and pencil that in. If we do fail to find any rules broken, then we'll have some problems, and we go back and check our work. You will not get different results from the mood figure method, the Venn diagram method, and the rules method unless you made a mistake somewhere. So it's unlikely that we made a mistake with the Venn diagrams or with the mood figure method because we reached the same results. But let's see, rules broken. We expect to see some rule broken. Where's my list of rules? Okay, let's close Microsoft Paint and open up another Word so we can have two things on the screen at the same time. All right, so this is the argument form, the argument pattern, the way of reasoning about things we're looking at, and here are our rules. Do we have a standard form syllogism containing 3 terms? Yep, no problem. Koi batni one time. The middle term must be distributed in at least one premise. The middle term, M, is distributed in the second premise, so no problem there. In a valid categorical syllogism, the term distributed in the conclusion must be distributed in the premises. The conclusion does not distribute any term, so no problem there. A valid categorical syllogism should not have 2 negative premises. Both premises are universal, not a problem. Sorry, both premises are positive, affirmative. They're A's, not E's. They're not O's or E's. They're not I's either, but they are A's, so they're affirmative, not negative. In a valid categorical syllogism, if a premise is negative, the conclusion must be negative. We don't have any negative premises, no problem there. So this rule, that's probably the one. If the premises are both universal, the conclusion must also be universal. Is that rule broken? Yes, so it is. So this argument breaks the 6th rule. It's what we call the existential fallacy. Now, if you were an Aristotelian, you would not necessarily think this argument is invalid. I think you would actually find it valid. And in fact, if you're an Aristotelian, you would actually have AII listed here in figure 4. You would not have this rule, and your Venn diagramming method would actually have told you to put some X's in somewhere as you were charting things. But since we're not being Aristotelians in this course, at least not since we switched over to the Aristotelian method after briefly doing the Aristotelian approach for the traditional square of opposition and some immediate inferences, some other immediate inferences. Since we're not being Aristotelians here, what shall we do about this argument? Shall we say it's invalid? Yes, of course. But you know what we could do? We could say this. We could observe that a person making this argument is reasonably assuming the guinea pigs, and for that matter, fuzzy friends and creatures that make good pets all exist. and can quite reasonably be making that assumption, and assuming that anyone hearing the argument can also make the same assumption. So what you could do is you could treat this as an enthemy, not strictly speaking a syllogism, but an enthemy, meaning there's one or two unstated premises here. And those premises would be I think actually one unstated premise would get the job done. And it's guinea pigs exist. So from the statement that guinea pigs exist, and the statement that all guinea pigs are fuzzy friends, we can conclude some guinea pigs are fuzzy friends. From the statement some guinea pigs are fuzzy friends, and the statement all fuzzy friends are creatures that make good pets, we can conclude that some guinea pigs are creatures that make good pets, from which we can also conclude that some creatures that make good pets are guinea pigs. So one unstated premise will get the job done. So what we could do is we could say, well, we could say the argument's invalid and leave it at that, and we'd be done, and that would be perfectly reasonable behavior for a student in a logic class, where you're almost certainly going to be sticking with the modern thing, the modern approach. But you could say, if you like, you could write down as a note to your teacher the argument could be considered valid if we were Aristotelians. Or you could go further and you could say, that the argument could be considered an enthemy, having the unstated premise that guinea pigs do exist. I advise you to actually just stop there. But just because I like being thorough in this video, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to redo everything with that unstated premise stated. So, valid or invalid? Oh dear, I better just control Z a lot. Okay, I guess that's as far as we want to control Z. But let's remove that issue. There we go. Now, all fuzzy friends are creatures that make good pets. Now let's add the unstated premise. So I've stated that the argument is invalid, existential fallacy, et cetera, but if you treat it as an enthemy and state that some guinea pigs exist as an unstated premise, which is a perfectly reasonable unstated premise to presume that a person is using who makes an argument like this, then you could consider the argument valid. I don't necessarily recommend putting that in your homework or on an exam, but this is one way you can work with this argument. Yes, this is a way of working with the argument. So now, what is the premise? Some S exist. No, some yes, I think that's right. No, some, yes, that's right. Let me make sure I have the argument symbolized properly. Working with the argument as an enthemy, treating it as having the unstated premise that some guinea pigs exist, the argument is all guinea pigs are fuzzy friends, all P are M. All fuzzy friends are creatures that make good pets, all M are S. Some P exist, not some S exist, silly me. Therefore, some creatures that make good pets are guinea pigs, some S are P. There we go. So now, what's the mood of the argument? Well, at this point, things do get a little weird. You can Venn diagram this, actually. Technically, you can Venn diagram some arguments that are not syllogisms if you have that extra step stated, but it doesn't add in a fourth term. You can't Venn diagram an argument with 4 terms, but you can Venn diagram an argument with a third premise, a fourth statement, and no extra terms, and that's what we're going to do here in a moment. So some P exists, that'll be easy, but what about the mood figure? I think we do the same thing. We say AAI, figure 4. I think actually for the mood figure method, we need an additional tool. We would need to treat this actually as 2 syllogisms to apply the mood figure method. We have to split it up. All P or M, all M are S. Therefore, this is a Barbara syllogism, I suppose. Therefore, all PRS. Sure don't feel like standard form though. And then all PRS, some S exist. So some, make that some P exists, so some PRS. In other words, extract the implicit, validly, totally guaranteed conclusion of these first 2 premises, give it over here in a separate argument, and then use that with your unstated premise, the unstated premise we added that some P exists, to get a 2-step syllogistic process, to get a process of giving 2 syllogisms, a chain of 2 syllogisms. And then you could test this one using the mood figure method. And it's going to be AAA 1. Beware, it doesn't look like standard form anymore. No, wait a minute, AAA. It doesn't look like standard form because we switched around the ordering of the premises. P and S. This gets terribly confusing. P and S would be mislabeled. If you're not following this, it's fine. Just don't do a mood figure method on this stuff yet. You can't really do a mood figure method on this argument, all PRS, some P exists, so some PRS, but you can still say it's valid. It's actually valid by let's see, it's valid by, I don't even know the name. It's just valid. You can state that it's valid and leave it at that. But I don't recommend doing much of this. This is just things you can do to play around with the argument to show that it's valid if you include that extra step, and applying the mood figure method as much as possible. But I don't advise doing much work with that. Let's instead go straight to the Venn diagram method. This will be much easier. Did I close Microsoft Paint? Silly me. So if you're going to Venn diagram this, all P or M, all M or S, so some P exist, what do you get? All P or M. Nothing is a P but not an M. All M or S, nothing is an M but not an S. Some P exist. That's what the Venn diagram looks like. You do end up with an X in the middle region, which is in which is the PMS overlapping region, which is to say some P's do exist. In this case, actually, which is to say, not only do some guinea pigs exist, some P exists, which is guinea pigs, but some S are P, some creatures that make good pets are guinea pigs. So now the argument's fine. Or can we even apply the rules method? Let's see. Standard form syllogism containing 3 terms. No, technically not a syllogism. So this rule doesn't even apply. But at any rate, it's not broken. Middle term distributed into premise, no problem, still distributed in premise 2. In fact, all these rules are fine, I think, except 6, but we'll get to 6 in a moment. Term distributed in the conclusion, distributed in the premise, no problem, nothing's distributed in the conclusion. We don't have 2 negative premises. We don't have any negative premises, so we don't need a negative conclusion. If the premises are both universal, the conclusion must also be universal. We have 3 premises, and one of them is not universal, so no problem. So no rules broken. Not all the rules, strictly speaking, apply, but at any rate, no rules broken. So this is a valid argument, but not technically a syllogism. So that's one way you can play around with the argument if you treat it as an enthymeme. You can still apply the Venn diagram method, no problem. You can state that it's valid. You can demonstrate that it's valid. You can apply the rules method reasonably well. The mood figure method gets complicated, and I don't recommend trying it. So I guess that does mean occasionally you might need more than one method available. But you know what? Let's go back to that mood figure method. I'm overdoing this. This is only for the true logic nerds, I guess. All right, let's go back to that mood figure method. In fact, let's not change anything we have typed up here. Let's go to the mood figure method. Now that I think of it, I already did this, didn't I? But let's retype it. You can observe that a proposition does validly follow from these premises. And that proposition is using all P are M and all M are S, all P are S. Now our symbolization scheme once again is messed up, but here's the standard form where we're using symbols in an unorthodox manner, but it's valid. And that is mood A figure 1, Barber syllogism. Using this conclusion, we have another valid inference that can get us to the conclusion of the original argument. And that's that. So that again is the mood figure method applied as much as you can to this argument treated as an enthymeme. And I suppose we're done. After planning to do a quick video, just reviewing 3 methods in rapid succession, I've done a longer video reviewing just a little bit of existential import enthymemes and 3 methods of testing a categorical syllogism for validity, plus some playing around with an argument that is valid if we treat it as an enthymeme, but it technically ceases to be a syllogism, and thereby we get some complications in applying our methods of testing categorical syllogisms for validity. Next video, we're going to do things, I hope, in a more orderly fashion, and we will talk about chains of syllogisms. See you then.